right, so now what we're going to do is, now we've done a whole lot of the project planning and really thought about what's going to happen and what's going to take place, and we've got to work breakdown structures and all that sort of good gear. We know what our budgets are and all that sort of stuff. Now it's time to actually kick the project out there and start getting on with it. So while we're actually starting to run the project, what we're starting to think about is our administration and our monitoring of what's going to take place. Okay, so you got your project plan, you got all the tools for managing the project, and now you're going to have to start doing things like conducting your team briefing and kicking things forward. All right, so all the different activity leaders and all the people involved in the activities need to get a really clear understanding of what their responsibilities are going to be while we start to get the project out there. So what we need to do is we need to come up with some sort of meeting or some sort of way of making sure everyone knows what's going on. And the first thing we need to think about is maybe convening a meeting or starting to communicate. So our considerations are pretty straightforward. Okay, what are we going to communicate? Okay, so if I'm a team member, most likely you're going to tell me what I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be doing it, when I'm going to be doing it. How's the project going to play out? What are the big items? Remember we talked about what are those big core tasks, not so much the smaller functions, but at that sort of top level, okay, what's going to happen and when, how they're going to be involved, where they're going to be involved, what stuff they need, all that sort of good gear. Now you need to think about to whom. Okay, so if you're going to give that message to those people, who are those people and how do they need to receive that message? Is this a briefing you're going to need to give them? If they're remote staff, how are you going to make sure that you're going to deal with that? All that sort of gear. So that brings you down to the how and when. So what message, or what method are you going to use to make sure that you can speak to these people? When is that going to happen and how is it going to happen? Is it going to be a video conference then? Okay, if I know I have remote staff that are working a long way away from me, or I need to do something, or maybe I need to do it as a Skype interview and send them notes. If they're local staff hanging around, I might be able to say, well, let's have a meeting and we'll do it next week. It's nice and quick. All right, I need to make sure I got a plan for budget management. Okay, so I need to be able to manage the budget, and all the people working with me and for me need to understand where they're going to fit into that, how they can spend, when they can spend, what are the triggers there. And I also need to know that for myself, so I'm able to watch the watch the budgets coming in and watch the figures rolling in so I can see if we're on track. And then lastly, I need to talk to them about risk management and problem handling. So what is likely to go wrong or what could possibly go wrong? And when and if that does happen, what do you want them to do about it? Okay. Now what we do, the reason we do this is to get 100% effort out of the people that we're working with and make sure that they deliver the project on time and within budget. All right, so there's a fair bit there that we're going to talk about. All right, so particularly when we're talking about the plan for the budget, okay, we need to understand that things can and will go wrong. All right, and that's so plan for the budget management, reporting, and monitoring. Okay, so that really needs to be re-emphasised to them, that the reporting and monitoring of the cash flow and the way they're using their expenses needs to go into that, because that's going to be your role, is to cash manage. Okay, and being aware that things are going to go wrong, and when they do, equipment can arrive late. That's going to affect different things. Like, if I don't have the key piece of equipment for my guys to start working on something, the problem is I'm still paying those people even though they can't work. Okay, so when the equipment does eventually arrive, I've got to pay them some more. So what happens is you'll find that one error starts to blow things out, okay? We have secondary and tertiary effects. Okay, this was late. Even though this was late, the rent is still being paid, the electricity is still being charged, all those things still happen. So really keeping an eye on that so that as mistakes happen, you're across it. The other thing is once you know if any of these things blow out, the reason they're telling you those is so that you can start to make adjustments to your cash plan, to your cash allocations. So that if something's going to be 6 months later than you thought, don't keep running the operation for 6 months. You might need to suspend it for 6 months and put a hold on it. Okay, so you're trying to get them to understand what's required so they can tell you as quickly as possible. Same by looking at your network critical path. So when you had your network before of all the different activities and you thought about the critical path through there, as long as people understand what all these things are, as things go wrong, they can fill you in, let you know what the problems are, and then you can make some clear management decisions about, do we continue or do we pause? All right, and things, there's different charts and measurements we can use on those. Start looking at costing examples, so the project crash costings and implications, that's not a bad one. It lets you know what's going on there. All right, what we're also trying to do is we're trying to give role and responsibility clarity. Okay, so if our people understand these things, we get our team together, we sit them down, and that's what we're trying to tell these people as well. What's going to happen? All right, so how's this plan going to work? The formal team meeting validates the project. We make sure that if we're talking about the project leaders, that they know about any changes that were made between when we planned and what the final plan is going to be. Okay, we want to make sure that we're in these meetings, that we're focusing the team's attention on their responsibilities, particularly around things like workplace health and safety. We want to keep these people safe. We want to keep these people on point. We want to make sure they're doing the right things and not getting anything wrong. Because not only if there's a large incident, not only is it going to affect them, and their workplace health and safety, if they get tired because we're working them too long and then they crash a vehicle, yes, that person gets injured and that has a lot of implications, but it also means that we're down resources, things get lost, broken, businesses stop while investigations happen. So there's a whole lot of reasons why we really need people to understand what's going on and approach it with some degree of safety and security. So make sure that you're speaking to those people now completely across that. All right, very important to feature in the meetings. Okay, so what we're trying to do is trying to get people responsible, not just for their area, but also their part in helping the whole project go. Okay, so that's the other thing we want to do in that, is to make sure that they really understand the whole project, where they fit in, and what we're really trying to do is engender or create a feeling that they are part of that bigger process and they want that to work. What's not so helpful is when people say, well, that's my department, and they get really focused on their little chunk. And they don't keep in mind the big picture. Because the other thing is if and when things go wrong, if they're only ever focused on their little part instead of the big picture, they don't understand what that means when that little part goes wrong. And so they don't tell anybody, or they sort of tell the wrong person, and then you're trying to run the bigger picture of the project and it's not happening. All right, so think about who you're going to brief. Make sure everyone knows their roles and responsibilities, particularly around your cash, because remember, budget's going to be a big thing. That's like a key resource. If you've got plenty of finances, you can always get new resources. But if you find yourself overcommitted because mistakes are being made and that's blowing this out, then you won't be able to get the resources you need from time to time. All right, so that's really the sort of things you want to get to your initial team briefing. That's not an exhaustive list, but that gives you a bit of an idea of the things you should be doing around about this stage. If you think of something else and you need to add it, by all means add it. This is not prescriptive. It's not chiseled in stone. You can add more to it. All right, great. Okay, so moving on past that, we start to think about more roles and responsibilities you have as the project manager. And really the key part here is support. Okay, support for your team. Okay, that's really the key part about that, because obviously you're not doing the project by yourself. You rely on other people to help you get it done. So you need to make sure that those people are continually communicated with and really understand what is going on, okay? So you need to be doing the reviews. You need to say, where are we? How far have we come? How far do we still have to go? How are we tracking the budget? How are we tracking to our resource use? Do we have the right people in the right jobs? What's going wrong? Having a look at your risk, etc. Okay, so that's all of your job to really get across that. Now, what you need to do then is to be able to communicate that back to your team at all points. So you need to be able to give your team clear communication. Clear, concise, easily understood communication, appropriate for the recipients, okay? So you've got to think about, well, who is my intended audience? What do I need to tell them? What's their skill level? What level of detail do they need to know? And how should I best communicate that? Now, part of that is also going to be about making sure that there's a plan of scheduled information updates, that you're going out and that you're visiting, that you're looking, okay? So don't just rely on collecting information from remote. Make sure you're getting out there on a regular basis to see what is actually happening and to actually meet with the people. Okay, a lot of this stuff, people seem to think, you can do it remotely, just send status updates, whatever. No, you've really got to get out amongst the people, see what's taking place. because that's also going to help your appreciation of what's truly happening. All right, so have visits, have meetings, schedule those communications, make sure you're delivering those. Okay, and do it on a regular basis, not just on key milestones, so not just when a major event happens or you've moved to your next phase or moved to whenever. Make sure they're on a regular basis, whether daily, weekly, or as appropriate to the business. All right, the other thing you need to do is make sure that you've got good record keeping. Okay, good record keeping is pretty essential. And what we're talking about there is that, you've looked at, those same things that we just talked about there, is that you're looking at the milestones, you're looking at, what the expenditures are, you're looking at, what's taking place, how many resources have we used, and keep those in some sort of record that's going to be easily understood, easily read, and something you can actually share with the other people that are going to require it. So you need to think about, who are my key stakeholders, what information do they need, and how's the best way to keep that. And keep it in a consistent, uniform manner, and make sure it's kept up to date. So, as I say, tracking those expenses as these people report in, track the expenses that they've incurred, track the resources that we've used, how many resources do we have left, where is everyone, what is happening, where are we up to, how much money we spent, all that sort of good gear. Keep it together, keep it in one place, easy to find. Now, the reason you should keep really clear records and keep them up to date is because if you need to move away to go to a different project, or you need to take a break or something, whatever happens, you can then easily provide your records to someone else. They can quickly read them, understand what's going on, and then supervise your project for you. Okay, so very clear, concise record keeping, really advantageous. All right, once again, manage the finances. Okay, don't delegate this one. This is you. Okay, whoa, there's an N there. Okay, so make sure you're managing the finances. It's your responsibility as the project managers to make sure that you're keeping an eye on the costs. Okay, it's not something you can really push to someone else. Someone else might do a lot of the data entry, but you need to keep an eye on the bigger picture. So what happens is, the budget may change from time to time, and what might change the budget is obviously if finances are no longer available, something's happened, that should be in your risk plan. What do we do if, and then crashing the plan. Need to think about also, what if we've spent more than we thought, make sure that's tracked there as well. You might find that you start to run short because the initial estimates you made at the planning stage weren't actually accurate. Remember, we talked about that. It's a risk there that, we need to make sure that's right. But, that's your job to keep an eye on it. And then if things start to go wrong, start to reschedule or replan your activities to make sure that you can still achieve the, your end state that you were looking for. Your sponsor might also change it. Okay, so you might find that all of a sudden the person who's asked you to do the project has changed the time frame or changed something else, and that's going to have an increase in cost. Particularly if you planned out, you might find that your costs go up. If they say, can you bring that forward a week or 2 weeks? Well, that might mean that everyone has to work overtime, which is paid at a penalty rate. So even though you factored for the salaries, you're now working, more hours. You might need to work out how that's going to go on the ground. All right. So those sponsor-driven changes, all of a sudden, I'm going to change that. The other thing is, if you've got a project that's been going for some time or lengthy in nature, you might find your resources cost changes. Wages increase, prices go up. You look at the price of petrol over time. It keeps going up. So you started with $1 figure and you end with a totally different dollar figure because things have changed in the interim. So the estimates that you made at the beginning might not necessarily be there anymore. All right, so really think about the finances, keep an eye on it, don't just assume they're all going well, keep regular updates, as I say, as you get them updated, keep clear records and make sure you're supporting your team as you go. All right, cool. All right, now that we've started talking about the team and our job to administer and run them and communicate with them, the other people we need to talk to obviously is our stakeholder communications. And what we're talking about there is, obviously our stakeholders have a slightly different information need than our team. And with stakeholders, they're going to want to know information on a regular basis. Now, obviously before we've begun the activity and before we've really gone out there and started doing things, we need to make sure that we know how often we need to talk to our stakeholders and what information they want. If our stakeholder happens to be like a government, we know every 3 months they want a GST statement of us, every year they want a tax return. They might need other stats in the meantime. So I need to know what stakeholders I have, what are the information needs they have, and make sure that I'm talking to them on a timely an appropriate manner so that we're providing them the information they need so that that doesn't raise problems for us. All right, now, if I'm thinking about the project sponsor or, people that are sort of, involved in financing this thing, they're probably going to want to know about milestone reports. So what are the key events that have happened? Have we got to this point? If we looked at the holiday before, have we arrived at the airport? Did we get on the plane? Are we now in destination? Are we now returning home? So where are we up to? What are those key things that have happened that we can mark the project on? If you're building a house, have you cleared the lot? Have you laid the foundations? Have you now built the outer structure? Are you now detailing the walls? Where's it up to? Right, other things that I want to talk about are, the budget reports. So how's the finances going? Reports on exceptions. So is anything not working? Is anything broken? Has anything gone wrong? Are we behind schedule? They want to know all those sort of things. So anything that's actually going wrong with the plan or any blowouts to timing, that's key information they're probably going to want from you. Now, to make sure that you're getting a good idea of what's happening, make sure you're looking at that network diagram again. Make sure you're looking at all those jobs and how they tie together and what's going to happen, because that's going to allow you to give some good answers. If you know a key activity is behind, you can look at the activities that then follow that and start to make an estimation of what your new timeframes are, that sort of stuff. So look, things are going to go wrong. It'll happen in every plan, sadly. That's just the nature of it. But being able to tell people, well, what that now means is highly important. Okay, the thing you don't want to get to is when they say, well, what does that mean that someone's behind? And you go, I don't know. Probably not the best answer as a project manager. So being able to identify what those key issues are, to identify your process tree and what's going to come next, very important. Make sure you've got that network diagram together. Make sure you understand what the implications are if things are going wrong. And then you can speak to those people with a fair degree of confidence, even if you've got a problem. The next thing is about thinking about your risk management. Okay, with your risk management, you need to make sure that you've got your risk treatment plan in place. You've thought about what can go wrong. You've thought about what you're going to do if it goes wrong. You've thought about how to avoid the problem, and you make sure that you're dealing with the most serious and immediate risks first. Okay, they need to get your priority. So all those big showstoppers that can derail your plan and stop this from being achieved, they're the ones you've dealt with first. The smaller risks down the bottom. Okay, so you do need to check your risk management from time to time, and that's your job as a project manager. As things are occurring, the likelihood and the consequence of these risks coming to pass get more and more important. If I'm building a building, the risk of fire doesn't really matter if I've only just got an empty slot of ground. But now I have a fully built building on it, okay? Now if there's a fire, I lose a whole building. So it's an entirely different set of priorities. Okay, so remember, as things change through your project, the risk management will have to change with it to address the changed circumstances. Okay, so don't just write your risk management and leave it alone, think it never gets looked at again. So take a look at it, make sure that you're staying up to date on your risk treatment plan, making sure that you've got a good risk register, so you're tracking what the risks were, what the objectives were, what your process or changes were, when did you check it, what did you check, and have you had to make any amendments, okay? So you can, once again, you can just come up with a chart and say that was my risk. When did I check? What did I do? Was the treatment still current? Has anything changed? What did I change? All right, and you can make sure that then everyone, once again, in communications, everyone should get a copy of that to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. All right, and once we get to the review stage, okay, we just want to make sure we've got these things together. Start asking yourself some basic questions. What support or what additional support do you feel now? You've got all your documentation together, you know who you're going to communicate to, you know what you're going to communicate, you know that you've got your risk management in place, you've got some sort of way of tracking the costs and accounting. You should have all the big ticket items, when you're going to go and meet people, what the key milestones are. Okay, so just take a quick look and say, have I given everyone the support they need? Is there anything else that I could give them to help them ensure that the time, the cost and quality outcomes for the project are met? What records or record-keeping systems have I got in place? How do I make sure that they're the ones to help me manage my project effectively? And how do I keep it all neat, tidy, and up to date? Making sure that you understand the term crashing a project. Okay, so get familiar with that. Crashing a project. go and have a little bit of a read on what crashing a project is all about, and make sure that you have some sort of schedule and some sort of format for reporting to your stakeholders on a regular basis, and make sure that they're up to date. Right, so as long as you're checking all those things, you've got your risks, you know what you're going to do, you know how much money you've got to spend, you know how you're going to track it. Everyone now knows what they're going to have to do. They all know their roles, responsibilities, they understand the bigger picture, you've got that stakeholder buy-in, and now we're sort of on to the next phase. All right, great, but that's a little bit about administering and monitoring.